Hey everybody, and welcome to Mondoid, your one-stop shop for all things Project Zomboid. So last week, Mondoid was about a minute and a half long, and that is because, well, RC3 came out to the public. About 6 builds hit before they had to pull it because of pirates. And, well, now Mondoid is up and running, and it is called Lucky Number 7 because of the 7th build that nobody got to see. So we've got a lot to talk about. I've got a few opinions on a few of the things they talk about here, and I'm excited to get going. So let's just roll down. By the way, new website. I don't know if you've checked it out. Go to projectzomboid.com if you haven't. Their website is awesome. It is gorgeous. It's very comic book style, which I really, really adore, and I think everything looks awesome. So check it out. New website is beautiful. So the first thing they're talking about is incompatibility bugs. And honestly, this is something that obviously is going to be kind of an ongoing fight for them as they continue with their build, primarily because it is in alpha/pre-alpha stage, and they need to work on it. So a few of the things they're talking about is, well, I should say the main thing that they're talking about here is the graphic card incompatibility, the Intel on-screen graphics card, and a few other graphics cards that are just having kind of a hard time doing it, as well as eventually working on the option of a smaller full-screen resolution in the meantime, but that's kind of been pushed to a lower bug fix priority as other things have cropped up. Now, we all know they're working on this, and we all know it's going to happen. One thing I have to say, and something that kind of came up in my comments a lot, or for some of my videos, particularly one comment that kind of showed up in a couple of videos that I kind of had to address personally through comments, was the idea that people feel entitled to have this thing work for them. Now, keep in mind, you aren't. I feel very strongly about this because this is alpha. This is something that is just happens in development. Now, keep in mind, if this wasn't in an open alpha, you would never even have access to the game at this point. But if you're one of the people who are yelling and screaming because version 6 or version 5 or RC3 in general isn't working because of X, Y, and Z, the best thing to do is go onto the forums and voice the bug. And don't do it in a demeaning, yelling way, telling them how mad you are that you paid, your whopping $8 2 years ago for this game, for a game that's going to give you a lot more entertainment in the long run once it's finished than $8 should be legally allowed to give you. But instead of yelling and screaming and saying how horrible the indies still are and being a general child about it, go to the forums, make sure you take a screen capture of what is potentially going on. If there's an error message, make sure you copy it down, or you take a screenshot of it and post it and say, hey, I was starting the game, it got this far before it crashed. Do you know a fix? Do you know this exists? And if not, what can I do to help? You'd basically... And keep in mind, you kind of agreed to this when you purchased the pre-alpha version, is you're basically paying to be a tester of the game. That's exactly what you're doing. You're testing the game for them by purchasing it early, and in doing so, be a little respectful that this is early on. They've disappeared. Essentially, the Industone had to go into recluse for a year to basically build the game from the ground up all over again, and now you're finally getting access to it. Don't expect it to work perfect and miraculously right away. Sure, some of the bugs are frustrating. God, I know the me dropping frames when I record bug is frustrating, but it's part of it, and you just kind of have to accept it and move on. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I could rant on about it forever, but I'm not going to. We're going to move on. The other thing they're talking about here is the hosting. This is just talking about the situation with pirates. They had to take it off because the pirates basically were hurting them. It was costing them a lot more money than it was worth them to keep that build up, because Amazon essentially cost them per gig. I don't know how much it is, but Amazon S3 is charged per gig, and they actually moved a lot of memory last week, a lot of gigs. And because of that, it costed them money, and with pirates downloading it illegally or just getting it right away, it was going to cost them cash. And essentially they just said, hey, look, we have to take it down. Pirates are costing us hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of dollars, possibly even in the thousands. So we had to take it down. But don't worry, they're also, once Build 7 is looking good, Build 7 will be out for everybody to check out. A lot of things they're going to be fixing, but the most notable thing they're going to be looking into fixing is the zombie difficulty changes. Now, I know a lot of hardcore players in general were talking about this is the perfect amount of zombies, and this is survival mode, of course. Sandbox is a totally different story. But they said that survival is the perfect amount of zombies, that just you're always on the run, always moving, always feeling like you're strained. And I was on the other end of the spectrum. I personally felt that there were too many. But before we get into that, let's just talk about some of the changes. So, all player spawn locations have been moved to the east side of the map where the zombie density is lowest. It's still possible to get unlucky, but you should find a lot less zombies immediately in the area. Zombie densities have made further lighter in the east, or rather the chance of spawning a horde and the size of that horde is more closely capped by the zombie density. So hordes should be rarer and less sizable in numbers. There are still enough zombies around to prove deadly if you're not careful. Remember, sneaking is your most powerful weapon now. 3. Loot spawns more strictly follow zombie density. So basically what they're saying is in the east, though it may be safer, a lot of the stuff you're going to find is not going to be useful, or essentially the loot in general is going to be much rarer in the east, while in the west, in the city, zombies are going to be much, much, much more numerous, but so is the loot. Something known they're talking about, and they have a little something in surprise kind of being built. So basically what it seems like they're talking about is something to do with zombie migration. Basically, something's going to happen in the game that's going to cause the zombies to move from west to east, but they're not talking about what that is. They don't want people to think it's NPCs because it's not NPCs. They say it straight out, but it's something to do with the metagame that is forcing the zombies to move west to east, and they're kind of keeping that a surprise for essentially what it happens, so I'm excited about that. Various bugs with indoor zombies and hordes have been fixed, meaning zombies should feel thoroughly persistent, which is good. And finally, there were some rare cases where zombies were erroneously hanging onto the player target long beyond after the player had left their vision. Basically, zombies were bloodhounds. They would constantly follow you. So I'm going to talk about my opinion on the zombie density thing. Now, in my opinion, like I said, I was on the other end of the spectrum, right? I thought that zombies were too numerous in number, especially early on. I was of the belief that if I was to start with that many zombies in the game at that point in time, my character should at the very least have a backpack, some sort of weapon, and some sort of food. Maybe even a safe house, but that's, stretching it. In game terms, I should have something, because at that point in time, if the zombies are that numerous and that, dense in the game, that means the virus has been around for a long time, a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months. And if that's the case, my character has survived that long. Why does he have nothing on him? So it made the game incredibly difficult. Very, very, very difficult. I could barely loot a house before getting anything. I could barely find a weapon. Being in a house was maybe a few seconds of safety at best. Now, this sounds all fun and great, and I'm all for that kind of difficulty. Here's where my difficulty kind of situation arises. Like I said, if I'm around and there are that many zombies early on, I feel like I should have survived for a long time. I'm of the belief that I prefer to start early on in the zombies, if the kind of zombie plague virus starting. So if I have nothing on me, zombie numbers should be very low. But eventually, maybe 2-3 weeks of in-game time, zombie numbers are significantly ramped up. Over the course of days, weeks, and months, eventually we'll get to the point where they were, in Build 5 and Build 6, where zombie hordes were around every friggin' corner. And I'm totally cool with that, say, after a month of survival, because at that point I've been able to get my bearings. Now, I'm not looking for easy mode either. I'm not looking for the game to kind of hold my hand and say, okay, now prepare yourself. I still want difficulty, but I want the early game to feel like I am alone, to the point of, there's nothing around me sometimes, but traveling is still dangerous. I want every decision I make to have some thought behind it before I do it. As opposed to just running into a house and grabbing as much as I can and leaving because there are zombies, at my back. I want to sneak into a house. I want to see if there are zombies around. If I have no weapon, if I can look through the windows and I see a couple zombies, I just say, okay, I'm going to leave this house. It could have all the weapons and loot in the world, but I'm going to back off from it. And that feeling didn't exist. The feeling of being careful and sneaking didn't exist. And because of that, it just felt like panic all the time. Run, and survival was incredibly difficult. Now, again, hardcore players were totally okay with this, but I was on the other end because I feel like at some point you have to say, yes, this is a zombie survival simulation, but it's also a game. And if you're only playing for seconds at a time or minutes at a time, this is a game about surviving as long as you can, then I just disagree with that mentality. I think there should definitely be a slower period early in the game where I'm sneaking, I'm making tough decisions, I'm walking on thin ice, and eventually the hordes will arrive, and every time you turn a corner, there's a horde, and that panicked, run-around feeling will be there. That's just how I feel. That's, of course, everybody's going to have their own opinion. Whether I'm right or wrong is totally in your mind or mine. I could be, for many people, I'm wrong. And, the Indie Stone says, there's also sandbox mode. The problem with sandbox mode is it's a quick fix, right? I can start and make zombies, a lot less numerous, but they're not going to grow in time. The sandbox will always make sure that if I start with low-density zombies, it will always stay low density zombies, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that's going to start low and ramp high and become the horror movie kind of trilogy in itself. My playthrough should feel like a horror movie trilogy where the zombie outbreak starts and then eventually gets so insane that I die from it. And that's what I'm looking for, and how long can you last in that. But that's just my opinion. Let's move on. Take a look at the rest of this blog post. So there were some other things that were kind of a problem. They're talking about there are circumstances currently that result in the contents of containers not saving out correctly. I did run into that in the earlier builds. Obviously, this fits into the danger category of game breakers, so we need to get this resolved. An example was I had 4 or 8 bandages. The next time I loaded up the game, I had 64. Of course, it's kind of a minor complaint, but it is game breaking because it can make the game much, much too easy. So they're working on fixing that before Build 7 is out. The map as well, they're talking about just continuing to decorate the map with potholes, grime, some polish here and there. Something that they keep secret, which they're not talking about, which I'm curious to see what it is. As well as making, adding more trees. And this is actually really important because they're saying numerous people have said finding traversing the forest is frustrating. Another change they're thinking about, they're flirting with, is making tree tiles slowly traversable, which is cool. I like that idea, particularly because it says though you'll basically be able to move through a tree tile slowly, much like you do a fence, but it makes a lot of noise and rustling and whatnot, and potentially able to squeeze through you'll have the option to, if you're running from a horde, to squeeze through this huge thick of trees to get out. On the other hand, so can zombies, so you'll actually be able to hear the zombies coming if they are coming through trees. And they talk about as well with sound that, as a side note, a sound system fix, you'll be able to work in stereo or surround sound, so you can tell where the banging is coming from, or rustling, or something else, which is very, a teaser there. I'm curious what they're talking about. And, when is Build 7 coming? They're saying soon. Other things, ETA, they're not totally sure, hopefully in the next few days. Most of it will go live, but again, they want to fix certain things, and I'm okay with that. So, actually a really, really awesome blog, a lot of information to give, mostly talking about the zombie spawn problem, which was my biggest gripe in general. And, and they're talking about other things. There are plenty of things we need to resolve in these builds before we're satisfied. Blah, 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 blah. If not, we'll get to it soon after. We won't be satisfied with anything less than the most bug-free version of Zomboid to date since day one, as overall polish and quality. Please be patient, understand in the meantime, etc., etc. So, an awesome Mondoid blog. Things look really, really solid. I'm super excited to see what comes with Build 7, and things will be going. I will, of course, be continuing my playthrough as I'm still alive in that playthrough, which is really surprising, especially after last episode. Holy crap. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to the Mondoid thing, or if you're just a weekly visitor, I highly suggest you check out some of my other videos. If you aren't and you enjoy this, well then feel free to just toss me a like for the Mondoid blog if it's at all useful, or you just enjoy hearing my opinion. Thank you guys so much for sticking by. I enjoyed bringing you this Mondoid, and I will see you either tomorrow or next week. I'll see you later.